Hello, everyone, and welcome to the UploadVR Gamescast. I am your host for this week, Jamie Feldham. We are here to talk about all the new news in the world of VR gaming, films, general content. To go through this mad world with me is the one, the only Harry Baker.
Hello. Welcome, everybody. An exciting week of VR content to go through. Some interesting stuff to talk about this week. Some stuff I'm excited to get into. How's your week been?
It's been a busy one. I've been
Yeah.
playing Green Hell, which we're going to
Yeah.
get to in a bit. Lots of interesting things to say about Green Hell. Probably not the conversation you're going to be expecting about it, which is quite promising. Have you been playing much in VR this week?
I have been playing mostly some Little Cities, which we've both been playing.
Oh, yes.
Which I have lots of thoughts on that, and perhaps similar to Green Hell, some things that you might not be expecting. I think I've kind of fluctuated with what I've thought about it as I've played. And then besides that, I had a good friend in VR, and I kind of watched him play Alyx, like the first 3 chapters of Alyx, which was a fun experience to watch on. I had it on the TV, so I was sitting in the lounge just doing other stuff. He was playing through it. That was a nice little refresher and reminder of some stuff that I'd kind of forgotten about that did really well. And he was just kind of fascinated by the whole thing. It's always nice to see through someone else's eyes, especially like he's a big Half-Life fan. And they're just little things. He's finding so many details in the world that I was like, wow, I just kind of walked past that and did not even notice. So super interesting to kind of watch that through someone else's eyes, see how someone else plays it as well, because it's just such so many ways to approach that kind of thing.
It's always interesting to remember just how, just the kind of reverence that a lot of people hold that game with as well. Because I was talking to the Alchemy Labs guys yesterday for an article that's coming later down the line, and they were just talking about how, like, they felt like they almost didn't need to do a shooter or anything because Alyx just did so much of it so well, and it will be like the definitive shooter for years to come. And I jumped back into it too this week as well to try it with a haptic vest, which I'll talk about probably this weekend. I'll have an article on that. So that's quite a shocking experience, you might say. Anyway, we'd like to thank our members who subscribe to us on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching the podcast, supporting Upload with your financial commitments. You are Lucas Longacre, Anthony Mann, Wexford, Robert Canonis ×2, Handy Panama, Daniel Bowen, Jerome Houston, Andrew King, Skiva007, Sexy Bicycle, Matthew May, Rick Tett, 360 Pickable, Smash Reality, Adam Hartzell, and John Westra. If you would like to support us, please consider being a member. Buy some merch. It's got our logo on it. We have a really cool logo. Look at that. No company has ever used this power sign before, I'm pretty sure. So, yeah, make of that what you will. Harry, let's get into the news.
So much news. What's first up?
Yeah. We're going to start off with, it's been a busy week for VR mods, which is always a scene I love reporting on. First up, we got new footage of Prey Dog's mod for Resident Evil 8 on PC with VR support. Prey Dog is someone that did VR mods for Resident Evil 2 and 3, actually made them full-on first-person games with actual motion controls, which was incredibly impressive. Is also working on PC VR support for Resident Evil 7, and then the last in the line, these are all based off of the Resident Evil engine, Resident Evil games. The last in the line of it will be Resident Evil 8. Did you ever play Resident Evil 8?
I've played like maybe 2 or 3 hours of it, which was actually my first ever experience of a Resident Evil game. I'd played, actually, no, that's not true. I played like bits and pieces of ones over the years, but like the first one I'd been like, I'm going to actually, maybe play this. And it's one of those games that I want to get back to from last year that I've kind of I played a bit of and was like, this is cool. I'll play more of it. And then kind of got busy with other stuff. But I really actually quite enjoyed it. I think it was quite a visually stunning game in like, not so much like graphically, but like the art style, the way the buildings looked, the design of the stuff. I think everything looks really kind of beautifully designed. And I would love to see that in VR. I think like the mansion, there's a whole bunch of stuff and I'm like, wow, it looked really nice to kind of look at. Almost like every frame was a bit like something from a movie, like a movie set, So I would really like to see, I would love that for that level of immersion. It reminds me actually of a bit like Alyx in that it feels like it has that kind of same level of detail everywhere you kind of look. You know, like even just a wood panel, you see something on, you're like, oh, well, there's like little drawings or there's something to look at everywhere. So no, but I'm intrigued by this mod because it looks quite good from the footage.
I think this is one of those times we could be in a funny situation in that obviously Resident Evil 7 has very, very good PSVR support. But there's no motion controls in it. All the aiming is locked to your head. So if an official version of Resident Evil 8 ends up coming out for PSVR 2, which is very much what's speculated /
Yeah.
hoped for, there's a good chance though the mod that's being worked on here might be a bit more accomplished than the actual official support, which would be really, really interesting to see.
Let's keep up.
Yeah,
I would like to think that an official one surely would, but yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
I like to think that Team Beef's mod of Doom 3 is a bit better than the actual official mod of Doom 3. So
yes.
So you wow, that's interesting. I didn't know. So you haven't played Resident Evil 4 in VR on Quest?
No, because I think we spoke about this around the time. I was like, well, I don't really want this to be my first experience of Resident Evil 4. Which is interesting because it's that perspective that you were kind of talking about in the review where it was like, well, if you've played it before, this is great. If you haven't, is this really the way you want to play it first? Like, sure, like, which to me, I'm like, no. Now, having known about that game and reading the review and all that kind of stuff, I was like, no, I actually think I want to play this differently first. To me, it's almost a bit like, which we'll talk about in a second, like Half-Life 2. If there was a VR mod for that, I wouldn't encourage someone to go play that first, you know, even though that's not a mod, it's an actual Quest game. It kind of feels like it occupies that space of like, you will like this if you've played it. So no, I haven't. The most experience I've had is bits and pieces of each here and there. Some of the like weird Resident Evil arcade games that have come out over the years.
Yeah.
And playing some of 8 recently, really.
Yeah. Half the novelty of it is replaying and seeing the things that you so enjoyed on flat screen alive in VR. So I definitely think, especially if Resident Evil 8 is going to get official VR support, you should go back and try the flat screen versions of the 2 remake and 4. I would say in this day and age, those are the 2 definitive ones.
I think I might have played some of the. I can't remember if it was 2 or was 2 the one that came out like not too long ago, like a few years ago.
Yeah, the 2 remake is a couple of years old, and then they did a free remake as well, like the following year or the year after that.
Can't remember which one I played, but I played part of one of them on PC at some point. I don't even know why, but I did at some point. Yeah.
But you also mentioned Half-Life 2 and the long-awaited, and I've been writing about VR for I think like nearly 9 years now, and I've been writing about this mod in particular basically that entire time. It's very much a vaporware thing of like people started it when there was like the Oculus Rift DK1 going. You got like some gamepad support in there, and you could play through the whole game. But then as motion controls started to come on board, and like the Vive came into the market and everything like that, people started working on a motion controlled version of Half-Life 2, which has seemed to get this kind of burst of energy like once every 2 or 3 years, where some excited new modder will come along and be like, like, here we go, it's gonna happen this time.
I've got a quarter of the game working, I swear.
And and then so what happened, I think it was last year, right, that they said actually Dr. Beef is working on it and with another modder, the name of which escapes me, but which is a shame because actually that modder is the one that's left on the project now. Apparently Dr. Beef's taken a leave of absence, and they're saying you can now play through like the start of the game through to like the airship bit. So that's what, like probably first 2 or 3 hours of gameplay. And it's not perfect, but it works and it's fun. And the next step is to get like the whole game from start to finish, and then start working on making sure it's actually feeling quite native and everything like that. So we've got gameplay on the screen of the mod, and it looks pretty promising. Like there's ladder climbing going on right now. There's actual hand models
It's funny how
physical
similar it
melee.
looks like to Alyx, even though it looks
Yeah,
like
exactly.
literally like a downgraded visual version of like it's just. And I think so much of that is because Valve have obviously, one of the things my friend was saying the other day when he was playing Alyx was like, all of this stuff is the same stuff. It just looks so much better, but I
Yeah,
recognize it because they've got that
yeah,
strong visual style, which I think is
yeah,
why it looks so similar. But yeah, it's interesting. What I thought was interesting too was that they were talking about this mod and they were like, yeah, actually, all of the work that was previously done, kind of a lot of it's useless by now.
yeah.
And I was just like, far out. Like,
Must be
it
so
just seems
hard,
like
mustn't it?
it's, yeah. And it's so, but basically, it sounds like they've almost started from scratch because a lot of what was done is now considered not, useful
Yeah.
anymore. So,
But it's looking promising. It's
yeah.
kind of, if it ever comes out, it's gonna arrive at a time where it's like, okay, really could have used this like 6 years ago,
Do
but
you,
whatever. It's a
do you
mod,
reckon,
and
do you reckon Valve ever have considered doing this themselves with Alyx stuff? Like,
I
do
think
you think
early
after
on,
maybe Alyx, they were like, maybe we could make like a year later
I
release a
don't,
Half-Life 2 thing?
I think it goes the things that Valve could and should do with its
Yeah,
back catalog
yeah.
go far
So
beyond
true.
just VR support for Half-Life 2. They go
It's so
like,
true.
Half-Life Source is a fully fan-made remake that Valve just ended up
Yeah.
supporting and saying
They were just
this
like,
is a really
yeah,
cool project.
yeah. All those ones that people have remade or like remastered. And they're like, just put it on Steam. You can have it on Steam because we're not going to do it.
Yeah. And
So
so
we'll chuck it on the
yeah,
store
there's
page.
like you get to the point where it's like I understand this is actually kind of why the series has kept some of its allure because that there is the bit that Valve makes and then there is the
Yeah.
enormous community support around it, which is again what we're going to get to again in a second. But yeah, I would just love to see not only it running officially with what Valve does with it, but also maybe you could get this running on Quest. Maybe that would be so cool.
Yeah.
It
But
would
I
be
think
very, very ambitious, but
I feel like I can't remember, but I feel like Dr. Beef. I think Ian interviewed Dr. Beef and he
oh
was talking
yeah,
about this. And he said there was
mm,
something specific about getting it on Quest. I can't quite remember
mm,
what there was something. I think it was basically like there's no Android version of it or something. But although that's not the case for other
oh
things, so I
okay,
don't know. I can't remember what the reasoning was, but maybe that's something that has now been resolved or is less of a
yeah,
problem. I don't know. But yeah, this looks like surely you could maybe get it on Quest. I don't know.
yeah.
Don't know.
I would like to. I mean, it came to the original Xbox, so there's got to be something we can do.
It's the Simpson Sit and Run coming to Quest 2. It's the anything that's
That's
on an original Xbox.
you watch that be at the Oculus Showcase next week, and everyone
Yeah,
lose their
man,
minds.
don't. I would lose my mind. That's my childhood. That was a game. And this is another mod. Mods galore.
Speaking of the community around Half-Life, so this
Yeah.
is. I was going to say this is called Leviathan, but it's
It's not it's called Levitation.
levitation. Wait, is that how
Yes,
you spell
oddly.
levitate? Okay, wow.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
Definitely didn't look at that a couple of days ago
Yeah.
and think levitation.
Yeah, I've also done that several times, yes. Yeah. But then I was like, no, it's
This,
levitation because the building, which you'll see in a minute, is
yeah, oh,
levitating.
that makes sense. Yeah, but it's also Half-Life, so I
Like
thought
this
maybe it was
one.
just some
Yeah, I know,
weird.
but that
Anyway,
maybe it's like that's the whole thing. It's a play on words. It's a play
so
on
this is
Half-Life
a
terms.
this is another fan-made mod campaign coming out for Alyx, and the trailer for it caused a bit of a stir this week because it's a really, really impressive trailer. Looks like a
Yeah.
very cinematic expansion of everything
Oh,
that
that looks
came
good.
before in Alyx.
Oh,
Like there's been a real explosion of great mod campaigns for Alyx this year,
yeah.
right? Like it's taken 2 years. People are getting used to, I think it's Source 2, the engine, and like we're starting to see some real good stuff. Obviously, I thought the Return to Rapture stuff was really, really incredible.
Hmm.
There's the Gunman contracts, which everyone is very fond of. I haven't tried those ones
Yeah, I have to
myself.
check out the
Yeah,
second one of that. I haven't checked out part 2 yet. It's been on my list for ages.
but
But yeah.
we're starting to see Alyx fulfill its modding potential in that sense, right? Like
Hmm.
there was a while there where we were getting cool stuff like, oh, you could pick up a crowbar and actually use it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it wasn't really taking on this massive life that you were expecting it to see. And I think that's just
Hmm.
because developers were getting used to the tools. And now we're getting
Yeah.
stuff. This basically looks like a 5-hour expansion to Alyx, right?
Yeah, it does, which, doesn't sound like a lot until you remember that Alyx is only like 12, 14 hours, depending on how you play it.
Yeah.
So really interesting. What strikes me about this is that I think they've clearly put a lot of effort into making the trailer look really good. Like there's motion blur,
Yeah.
there's like trailer effects. So it makes me kind of also go skeptic in me is like, will this be as good as the trailer? Does it
Yeah.
look really good? Will it, like, but that being said, usually these things when they look this good, Alyx campaigns in particular do tend to live up
Yeah.
to it. What I would love some clarity if one of the modders is in the chat or something who was working on this. These Russell voice lines, right? Every time there's an Half-Life Alyx mod that comes out, I'm always like, I have to write this article, and I'm like, is this an impersonator? Are they reused lines? It's so hard to tell. And G-Man as well. It's kind of like one of those things where they could be stitching things together. They could be, I don't know, maybe we're using AI these days. I don't know what
I
they're
think
doing.
I think G-Man is definitely a fan
Stitched or a
voiceover.
fan? Yeah, okay. You
I
probably know
think so.
G-Man's voice better than. But I mean, yeah, it's kind of like I always am like, this is hard to because we've had a few mods now where they've got impersonators in. I know there's people I've played other ones where they've repurposed the lines or stitched things
Yeah.
together. That's one of those things that it's always impresses me. / I'm always like, what's going on here? Is this new recordings? What are we doing?
Yeah.
But yeah, it looks very cool.
Yeah, I'm super down for it. Like I said, I jumped back into Alyx with a haptic vest the other day, and he like playing through the kind of North Star chapter when you're in that hotel.
Oh,
Yeah,
what a chapter!
Just the texture to that game. You're just looking around like,
Yeah,
oh man, I wish we'd seen more of this stuff in the past couple of years. But
yeah.
it's
That's one of
gonna
those
get there.
things too. I've talked to my friend and he's like, "Oh, this is getting pretty spooky," and I'm like,
Oh, just you wait.
"Wait, just you wait till you're in the dark and when they got a torch and there's just things leaping at you everywhere. Terrifying,
It is
terrifying."
nice to be on the other side of that with Alyx, and
Yeah.
I'm able to jump into any section of the game now without really worrying about jump scares or anything. The hairy head crabs, I'm kind of over now. They were a
Yeah.
big
To
they were
watch
a
out
big
for toilets.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's what's new with the mod scene. If you're a mod, thank you for your service. You're making VR a much better place to report on. Moving on. We have
What's up?
a
What's up
story about
next?
Flight Simulator, Microsoft Flight
Oh,
Simulator, which is, still trucking
going-
along as it would.
yeah,
as it
it's
would.
Flight Simulator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But on a developer kind of Q&A session earlier this week or last week, the developers Asobo revealed that around 10% of people play. This is interesting wording. Play exclusively in VR.
Yeah.
So there's actually probably even more people
Yeah.
that play sometimes in VR, sometimes in flat screen. In fact, one of the developers themselves said that.
Do you think that though? Because I was thinking this through the other day, and I was like, well, if someone has a VR headset, because the type of person that plays Flight Simulator is a dedicated person in general. Like,
Yeah.
if you're playing it still now, like you're still playing it, you're a Flight Simulator person probably. And if you're playing it a lot and you have a VR headset, I reckon the number of people who do both is probably smaller than you think. Because
Yeah.
if they've got a headset, they're sitting down, they put on the headset, they're doing the full thing, or they're just playing on PC. I don't feel like if you have a headset and you're that kind of person playing Flight Simulator, you're either in it all the time or, you're, I don't know. So
I think,
but it's still impressive. It's definitely a bigger number, right? There's definitely at least maybe, who knows, 12, 15 total. I don't know.
the initial 10% was way more than I was expecting, to be honest.
Yeah, for like all the time too. That's pretty nuts.
I feel like we see so much. It's one of those things where you see so many people be like, "You must bring this to VR, and I will love it forever." And then,
and you wonder
it comes
how
out, and
people
you don't actually have that same kind of
Yeah.
reaction. But this is that's super encouraging. Like you said, it's very much an enthusiast market. So I wouldn't be surprised if even beyond that, some of that percentage isn't just people connecting via link on Quest 2, but like something like the Reverb G2 or the Vive Pro 2, right? Like something
because you could
super
also
high
use it with an
resolution.
actual throttle accessory and whatever
Yeah.
on your desk. You wouldn't need to be using motion controls, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, super interesting. I also think too. Oh no, I've completely lost my train of thought. Jamie, take the wheel.
Well,
What was I going to
you
say?
probably looked at this video and thought, "My God, that's choppy footage." Which, yeah, this is I recorded this like 2 years ago now,
Yeah.
when it first came out. I have a much better PC now, so I should definitely try
Yeah, see,
and jump back into
I can't
this.
even
This
try it because I don't think my computer would be able to support. I've only got a 1080. I'm pretty sure that like
no,
just
nope, nope,
yeah,
nope, nope,
not going
nope.
to happen, right? Like, so I
This
haven't even
I
bothered.
I was having troubles on a 3070 Ti a couple of months ago, but now I have a 3080 Ti, and I'm hoping that might just about make the difference
Yeah,
if I jump back in with
yeah.
like a Rift S.
Oh,
But
remember what I was going to say?
hit me with it.
The reason that I think is even funnier that that whole statistic got brought up. We're
Mm,
talking about, whether people would even, if they're like, I really want this, then you get it, and you're like, oh, people are actually using it. People are using it so much that they complain that there's bugs in it, and they
yeah,
keep
true.
being like, hey, what's going on? Are you going to fix these bugs?
Yeah.
Because there's like there's a list of a couple of, I think, fairly big bugs, like sometimes things look washed out or stuff like that. Uh, and enough people were like, these, you've acknowledged the bugs, but like, what's happening? Are you going to fix them? Like, and so the whole reason the stat came out was they were like, oh yeah, sorry, like we've got to sit down, do the work. We know that you're waiting on it. We play MVR too. We're aware. So it's like, even if it's 10% or not, there's enough people, you know, loudly
I mean,
playing it enough to be like, hey, there's bugs, fix them. We want to play this perfectly, kind of thing.
10% of your audience going through bugs would be
Yeah,
huge. If like
yeah,
Elden Ring had launched with something and 10% of players were like, we
totally.
have this problem with it, that would be a massive, massive, massive headline.
I do wonder
Um,
what the player base is for this. Like, if that's
I
10%, what does
think
10% look like? It must be pretty big, right?
I think it's pretty big. I think if you,
Yeah,
like you said, like the dedicated market for this
had been
is
waiting for this
really
game too.
significant.
Yeah,
Like you think about, I always think about. Do you remember the MMO Eve Online,
yep,
made by the CCP guys who obviously did Eve Valkyrie and got into VR for a little bit before
yeah,
pulling
yeah,
out? You never hear anything about that game, but they always host a massive event for it in Iceland every year, where they bring people in all over, from all over
yeah.
the world, and like hundreds and
Where are these
hundreds of
people
fans
coming
are there.
from?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And
yeah.
it's a big, deep, complex game with economies and everything that you need to
Mm-hmm.
like trading and everything like that. And you're like, who has time for this? Turns out
Yeah,
loads of people have time for that.
thousands of
Um,
people.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So I think the developer Asobo is just sitting pretty with a lot of very, very dedicated players. World
yeah,
updates have been coming out every couple of months, pretty much. Modders can make money selling their own packs for it as well. So
yeah.
it's got its own
It's pretty cool.
thriving, sustainable economy built into the game.
It also reminds me, this is a slight tangent, but it reminds me of like the people who play this are so dedicated to it, as we've said, that they will pick up on like all the bugs. Like I used to do many
Yeah.
years ago, I worked in a market research place where sometimes we would call up people who had, it was on behalf of an energy company, and it was people who had called up to complain about a broken street light because they had noticed that the street light was broken, called up the energy company, being like, fix it. And then we'd be like, hey, did they fix the street light? Were you happy with that? And these people would always do the survey because it's like the type of person who calls up about a broken street light is going to do a survey a month later about that broken street light, right? And it's like the people playing this
Yeah.
are going to submit bug reports and be like, hey, all of these things are not working. Please fix them. I play this twice a week for 10 hours a day.
Yeah.
Get
People
it
are
together.
really into that stuff, aren't they?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's one of those
I
things. Yeah.
I would really like to dive back into none of us have tried it since it got the controller support, right? So I feel like that's a
Yeah.
thing we need to dive into. But again, like it got controller support, but they weren't like you could now fly with a virtual joystick or anything like that. So I still feel like
Mm.
there's
And they have said
lots of
hand
work to be
tracking
done.
maybe.
Yeah.
Which is, but is that implying that you would flick all the switches on the thing yourself and stuff? Is that what that's saying?
That's I would like to think it is, but that's not what you can do with the controllers right now, I don't think. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness, I
it's
just flew
exactly
over a
like
bridge.
like is there any is there any way you can do that in the game at the moment? No, it's just like that's kind of just a visual, right? No matter how you
Yeah.
control it, you don't really ever go and I think you no, although I think
No,
you
this
push
is
the
a this
throttle
is
up
a
the
Heaney.
throttle anyway.
This
Yeah,
is a Heaney
yeah,
topic, isn't it?
yeah,
The
yeah.
man
It
the
is.
man would know.
He
But
would
I
know.
would love to go back and properly try and tackle and review it at some point if you could get A, the performance, and B, the controls. And we're getting there, I feel like.
Get like 5
Moving on.
3080s and a Varjo and have a great time. If that would even work. You might have like 10 3080s or 3090s. Just get a lot of them, stack them up, get like a server farm in your own house. You've got room, I'm sure.
Yeah, sure, somewhere, and the money, right? Yeah, that's all you need.
Totally. Like a casual, like 20K on a flight simulator, it's nothing. That's cheap as chips. Have you heard what most flight simulator people invest into this stuff? It's a lot. Anyway, moving on.
All right, next up, something that won't break the bank, I'm sure. Do you remember Rhythm of the Universe Ionia from last year?
Yeah, I do. Why
did you ever play
you say that? No, I did not.
You did a lot of coverage on it, I remember, but you never...
Yeah, I wrote about this game, well, not this game, but the Ionia a lot, and I did not play it, but it was just one of those ones where it was like, oh, it's been delayed again. It didn't make its date again. It's coming eventually, and then eventually it came out. But you did play it, and you thought it was okay?
Not great, yeah.
Not great, okay.
So it had a lovely world. It was a very like environmentally positive game, which is always something you should celebrate. But it was 40 minutes at the end of the day, and
that's right.
It was 40 minutes for like $40, right?
Yeah.
And actually,
like 40 months of waiting.
Yeah, and like you said, delay after delay. Lovely visuals, came to all platforms, everything like that. But yeah, it wasn't even close to what it needed to be. Really. And so I thought that was probably the end of that. I didn't think we were going to see the whole series again, probably. Surprise, surprise, a sort of sequel is actually coming out this summer on Quest 2, Rhythm of the Universe EOLIA.
EOLIA.
Which is, I guess, you can think of this as the Rhythm of the Universe cinematic universe.
Well,
in that this takes place on a different world.
5 games.
Yeah.
Like they were like, there's 5 of them coming. And so I'm presuming there's a vowel for each of them. I'm guessing we're getting Ionia, Onia.
Yeah.
I don't know
which vowels are this is exactly it. Last time I spoke with the CEO of ROTU, Jason Parks, a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying, like this is number 2, but we still have the plans for the next world and the world after that. And all of these are different worlds. So you won't be seeing the same characters from the first game. You might be getting hints that those worlds exist. But that storyline has stopped, and then this is a sidestep.
Bit confusing. A bit like what I don't know how this is working. How does this
let's pull it out.
Yeah.
What I didn't realize before I spoke to the developer last week is that Rhythm of the Universe is not just a VR thing. It's been like a stage play and stuff at one point in its life. So it's this big
crazy
grand vision that the company, which is called ROTU, which obviously stands for Rhythm of the Universe, has just fully committed itself to, and VR is the latest medium that it is going into that. So characters from that game, the first game, were actually on stage at some point doing a environmentally friendly play.
Right.
Yeah.
Who's funding this?
So,
well,
exactly, right?
Yeah.
So what's going on with EOLIA is that, like I said, it's set on a different world. It's more of a barren desert planet this time. But very, very, very interestingly, the entire game is hand-tracked. It is, you can play with controllers. Yeah. You can play with controllers if you want.
Right.
But they've designed all the interactions around hand tracking technology to the point where if you do, the classic hand tracking pinch, which I'm doing right here, then you can like move your hand around on like an axis essentially to do smooth locomotion. So it's not only just, like hand tracking, but you're standing in one spot. It's an actual living, moving VR game. This series has always had a connection with music. So you'll be doing a bit more like precise things in this one, they say, like plucking stringed instruments rather than, hitting drums and stuff like that. You can do that too, but they're kind of getting into the minutiae. You see a little flute here, moving the fingers on the flute. You also like ride mounts. And the other thing they say is that this is going to be a longer game, like hopefully in the span of like maybe 3 to 4 hours. Rather than 40 minutes. So
well, that's good.
Yeah, I'm kind
of confused, to be honest.
It's a strange world, but I also kind of heard what I needed to hear to pique my interest once again for the sequel. Like if they can come up with better, deeper gameplay for a longer amount of time that gives you more time to like really connect with the world.
Yep.
And they kind of pave the way with hand tracking technology a bit. Like there's like the climbing mechanics of the first game are still in there and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it could be definitely a very curious little game. I won't say I
Yeah.
think it's going to be like a must play adventure, but I'm
Yeah.
definitely eager to see
The
what
the
becomes of
hand
it. Right?
tracking thing is just, it just. I mean, visually it looks pretty cool. Looks
Yeah,
interesting. It's just one of those things where you just go, wow, this is this whole universe that we're banking on, and there's several things going about it. And it's like the first one was a bit short and got delayed like 5 times and took forever.
yeah.
And the second one's coming and it's longer and it's got hand tracking. I'm kind of like, wow, well, that's all. It's a
This
lot.
one thing to say in its favor is this is only coming to Quest 2 for now.
Yeah, that's my next question. There's no
No PSVR and no PC, which I think
Oh, was the other one on PSVR as well?
yeah.
Okay.
And I
Right.
think the thing was that they started on PC, right, and then had to do the whole. Oh, and that's the other really crucial thing to say about it is that before the pandemic, it was meant to be a location-based entertainment thing. Like they
Oh.
were going to have it on like a cruise ship or something.
Well, that explains the
I was
like
being told.
40-minute length.
Yeah. So yeah, it
Yeah,
does, doesn't it?
okay.
So you're like,
Right.
oh, right. A lot of
Oh,
this suddenly starts to make
yeah.
sense. This was never
Right.
actually really meant to be a home-based product.
And they were like, quick, get it on a Quest.
Yeah, exactly.
Get it on PSV. Okay, yeah, right. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
So if they're focused on one platform and they're
Yeah.
like delivering, they know they're delivering a home-based experience this time. Maybe it could be a big improvement. Maybe that's what
That has just
I'd like to
reframed
think.
the whole first game thing for me, especially the 40
Yeah,
minutes. Because I'm like, why? Who would put out a game like that, 40 minutes, and be like, yeah, that makes sense because you want to, that's the kind of length for like a, bigger location based thing that you're playing kind of single player. Yeah. Cool.
yeah.
Well, interested. Wonder what it'll be like.
Speaking of strange, dark fantasy games that have weird, dark lore behind them,
Where are you going with this?
Myst
Oh,
is coming
yes, right. Okay. Yeah.
to Walkabout Mini Golf, which Ian Hamilton, editor in chief for the US and UploadVR, incredibly
Oh, he's
excited
so
about.
excited. He's so excited. You can just tell. You can feel it.
He's always been a big, like, huge Myst guy. He reviewed Myst
Yeah.
for us when it came to Quest 2 at the end of last year. This is such a cool idea. We already knew that Walkabout was getting, is it Labyrinth DLC?
Yeah, I'm
Tied
excited
into
for
the world
that.
of
I'm a
Labyrinth.
Labyrinth man. I'm a
Yeah,
Labyrinth man.
but
Dance, baby, dance.
this is gonna be areas of the Myst Island, which I
Yeah.
think apparently they've been chopped and changed just a little bit
Yeah,
to
just a little bit,
fit
apparently.
golf courses. And it's gonna be just a really cool themed
Mm-hmm.
course.
Mm-hmm.
I think, yeah, I'm really. This is the collaboration where I'm like, okay, I would jump in and play that. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not like the world's biggest Myst fan. I'm not the world's biggest Walkabout fan, but the idea that you could go and revisit this as a sort of like
Yeah,
theme
totally.
park celebration
Uh-huh.
of those
I'm
worlds.
just like, give me more. Like, give me more
Yeah,
VR collabs. Give me a Half-Life Alyx one. Give
yeah.
me a Resident Evil one. Give me I don't know. Give me a Beat Saber one. I don't care. Give me I can
Oh, that
chop
would be
some
really
blocks
cool,
with
though.
my club as I'm hitting balls or
A Beat
something. I
Saber
don't,
one
I
would
don't,
be
I don't know.
amazing.
Yeah, it could just be a really long straight hole.
Yeah.
And then you hit that, and then it'd be like a long straight Billie Eilish hole, and then a long straight Lady Gaga hole. Yeah, no, I reckon it's like giving more of these kind of VR / traditional game collabs / weird 80s David Bowie movie collabs. Weird. I like that they're also kind of, I wouldn't say Myst is obscure per se, but like when you put the two Myst and Labyrinth together, you're kind of like, oh, you could have gone with like, I don't know, not that they maybe know that people do this, but like you could have gone with like Avengers and Batman map. But instead we're
there's like a
getting Myst
million
and
other Star Wars things.
so many
why not
things I
this?
would have picked. If I had to guess, if you said Walkabout is going to do an IP thing, I would have been like, I don't know, Star Wars, Batman,
Yeah,
or something smaller, but like on that,
I think this is the kind of start of that domino effect, though, right? I was also thinking about that, and then I was thinking about the 4VR games, so 4VR Bowl and Dart.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh man, they should totally just go in this direction too. Like,
Yeah,
I would love to
Gotham
bowl
City
in
arcade.
an Imperial hangar or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And I guess it's it's a cool collaboration, but I guess in some ways it's that kind of realization of what some people think a so-called metaverse would be as well, right? Of you just
Mm,
get to be doing stuff in all your favorite places
yeah, do
and
whatever, wherever,
celebrate. Yeah,
if it's been licensed.
yeah.
Yeah,
So this is coming in the fall of this year.
yeah,
I'm really
after the
looking forward
Labyrinth
to
one.
trying that out. I would like to see. I would like to see a no. I'm trying to think of cool. An Astrobot one, I think would be really cool if you were still giant.
Mm,
Obviously, that's a
mhm,
far more
mhm.
um, tougher thing to do because I don't think Walkabout is on PSVR yet. But that'd be
I would
really cool.
love to see an unplugged one that went through all the venues and
Oh
also
my
had
god,
the
that'd be really
songs in
cool.
each of the areas.
Yeah, they should
Yeah,
totally team up with Vertigo after the fall. Arizona Sunshine,
yeah. And then you could
Unplugged,
do you could even do like a Vertigo
Fisherman's Tale.
course. You could do like courses based on developers where it's like it goes through sections that pay homage to each of the games. That'd
Yeah,
be cool. Yeah, totally.
Imagine a Fisherman's Tale golf course where you
Oh,
had to hit it into the
yeah.
lighthouse and then the ball is suddenly
Uh-huh.
smaller and you're oh my god,
Totally.
that's the coolest idea
Yeah.
of it I've
They'd
ever
spend
heard.
like a year just like reprogram the entire game just to get that going.
It would have to cost like $60.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
that is the news for this week. Lots of
Good
cool
random
stuff coming up.
news. Yeah.
Let's get into some impressions, and we're going to start off with Little Cities, which we have preview code for,
Mm.
and we've both been playing. I wrote
Mm.
a preview of based off. I probably played about 2.5 hours of the game. I would say based on the
Yeah.
first two
I'd
islands,
say I'm about the same now, I think. Maybe.
and I
Maybe.
would say I've been really enjoying it. It is definitely a very relaxed. The word they always use is cozy kind
Mm-hmm.
of game. I think the soundtrack, as you're kind of pottering about the island, is really
So
fantastic.
good. Yeah.
I think it has just enough minutia there in terms of like the economics of its system. So you build 3 different types of houses. Like you have your residential zones, your commercial zones, and your
Yeah.
industry zones, where you have to kind of like keep them all equally spaced out so that residents don't
Yeah.
get unhappy, but you have
Not a
enough
stinky
commercial and
factory next to
yeah, yeah,
a
exactly.
house and enough shops near houses and yeah.
Yeah, or wind turbines and stuff like that.
Yep.
And all of that is kind of what you would expect from a game of
It's pretty
this
stock standard. Yep.
caliber. Yeah, right. Like you keep your
Yep. It's
residents
it's
happy,
part of
but
the
also make
genre.
sure you manage your resources.
Mm-hmm.
I think where we're both a bit like, ooh, don't know, is if it has the depth to then keep you going past 2.5 hours, right?
Yep. Yep. So, because for me, I played the first one and then I played this level and basically finished this level. Did you end up finishing this one?
I think I got to level 20.
Yeah, because I think I got to 25 or whatever. I think that's the last
Yeah.
the 25. So I finished the whole island basically. And this level, the first one, I was kind of like, oh, this is interesting. I don't know where it's going to go, like how it's going to. Then I played this and it both solidified and changed my thoughts in that
Okay.
I think like there doesn't need to be like heaps more management depth to this. Like I think if you think of like City Skylines, if we ignore the fact that there's a City Skylines game also coming out and just
Try
talk about
to.
the
Yeah.
original City Skylines, there's a lot of deep management of like you can change taxes for specific zones. You can, there's a whole bunch of different stuff you can do specifically like management menu stuff, which I don't think this necessarily needs, but I do kind of think I wish I had a bit more. This focuses on you building stuff, and I want you to be able to manage more via building things with more variety. Because I got to a point where I was like, man, I really just wish I could build a bridge so that I didn't have to have an intersection. That's what I kept
Yeah.
coming back to of like, oh, there's one way in, and like particularly this part. I was like, there's one way in and out of this area, and
Yeah.
there is traffic. It's not like as a City Skylines level of like your traffic can get so bad it ruins your city, but things were taking longer to get built. And I was like, I need a way to fix this. And I was like, I just wish I could make tunnels and, bridges, elevate the roads just so I can kind of have more flexibility with where I am, like more planning, like more distinct kind of decision making of like,
Yeah.
because it feels like even looking at this, our islands look very similar. You
Yep.
know, like
You
you've done pretty much the same thing I did, right? Like maybe the zoning
there's
is different, but there's only so much you can do.
because you're working with a relatively small landmass, and
Yeah,
your roads are only ever going to be angular, right? There's no
yeah. There's
curving or
no
anything like
curving.
that. It does feel like you almost have like that big green mat of Lego tiles where
Yeah,
you can actually stick all the Lego down rather
yeah.
than
But you've only got flat
you're
tile
actually
pieces.
yeah. So, but
Yeah,
I agree with you because I got this half of the island that we're seeing. If you're watching on the video, like we're on a volcanic island, and you start off in like the top right corner, and then you can either
it's four quarters
you can
basically around the
yeah.
volcano.
And so I built down one straight half of the island straight away, and there's like this very thin bottleneck bit at the base of the
Yeah,
volcano to get past as well. And I was just basically, as I was building, I was doing fine pretty much the
yeah.
entire time.
You're never kind of in trouble, like huge trouble
Yeah,
either.
and
Uh,
there's an element of like, yeah, it wants to be a relaxing city building game, and that's great. But I need like to start level 6 and level 6 to be like, okay, you need to be like on the
yeah, like
ball
on
with
your
every
toes.
decision
Yeah,
and making it like at the
totally.
right time. Because
Uh-huh.
otherwise, why would I start a new island over just
Yeah.
sticking with the ones
That's
I've
and
already
that's
built if I'm not going to have a different
that's
experience?
similar to the beginning of this island when I got the first quarter. I was like, "Oh, I'm just doing the same thing as the last island."
Yep.
Like, even though there was a few different items, I was like, "Oh, this is I've got to wait till I get to like level 6 or 7-ish, and then I'll start to get different things or to get more
Hmm.
challenging." But I will say, I don't want to just focus on the because I like really enjoyed playing it. I was like losing track of
Yeah.
time, having a great time. It's really fun. I think also the little haptics, the sounds. You have this
Yep.
wrist thing where you can see there where you turn your wrist and you can look at your stats. It has amazing sound design, I think, and really
Yep.
it's one of those things where it feels like I'm actually physically turning my wrist and something's popping up that's making a big noise.
Yeah.
Uh, it's not just like a little virtual sound effect. It feels like a real physical thing. It's great. So there's a lot
And
of like fun things about it. Yeah.
yeah, and the UI is bubbles basically. You have these bubbles
Uh
above
huh.
your hands that you basically pop to select what you want. And
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
definitely one of the better, like more seamless VR UIs I've ever actually used.
Yeah,
I
you
think
get
I am
very at
instantly
first I was a bit
snapping through it.
confused, but you get very used to it very quickly and start
Yeah.
like snapping things quickly. There are a few things that I w- that are- that annoyed me about it in that there needs to be if there's an undo button for a city builder game, there needs to be a redo button, especially when the undo button
Yep.
looks like a back button.
Yep.
Because there was a lot of times where I was like going through the menus quickly and went, "Oh," and I was like, "No, that's the undo button." And then I was like, "Oh,
Yeah,
there's
I
no
did that.
redo button." Needs to be a
That's
redo
true.
button. Like that's to me that's essential. And I don't know, the only other thing which is you can kind of see happening here in this footage on the screen, which I got to this point with every quadrant where I was kind of like, I haven't unlocked the next one yet, and I'm like 3 or 4 levels off,
Mm,
and it says to increase it, I've got to increase my population to level up, but I don't really know how to do that because I've kind of filled up all the
yeah.
space.
Yep.
And the population
I have
kind of
that
seems
too.
to just go up anyway. I think it just kind of goes up
Yeah.
because more. I don't know. I think it just happens naturally. But I kind of was like, oh, I'm. There was definitely a point where I was like, I'm just killing time here. Uh, yeah, I want to
You just
do more stuff. Yeah,
actually at the start of this video is I like cut off the
yeah. You're
first
like
2 minutes
watching.
because I
Yeah,
was just watching my hand being like, "It's am I going to go up another level soon?"
yeah,
And
and
sometimes it gives you a hint to say like what you should do, but sometimes then it's like I got oh, you need to increase your number of cell phones to increase the
yeah,
uh
coverage.
yeah, the coverage. But then I looked across the entire island and it was like, yeah, but no one's actually complaining about that. So
Yeah,
and
it
the
said
ones I've
that to
got
me like
are
even if there was
covering
one
that.
person, and I was
Yeah.
like, well, that's like there'd be one. My circle would cut off at the edge of the island. There'd be one
Yeah.
that was like half in the circle, and he wouldn't have it, so it would tell me that. So yeah, I had
Yeah.
stuff like that too. I also I I just I don't know. Like, there's the other thing that I think too on the thing I was saying before about like building options. One thing that City Skylines does is as you get further up, when you do this zoning where you go, I'm making this residential. you can then
Mm.
change the density of a zone. So you can go,
Mm.
I want this to specifically be like high-rise residential. So once you get to like skyscraper level, which maybe this does later on, I don't know. I don't think it does though, because it doesn't seem like it will or
Mm.
would. But that's the kind of little bits of depth. I don't want like more menus of like adjusting tax rates. I want to be able to be like, okay, this side of the island is gonna be high rise,
Yeah.
on the coast, and it looks really cool. And that also gives you more visual options of like design, because you can be like, well, this area's high rise commercial, then there's high rise, residential. It gives you a bit more to play with. That's the kind of stuff that I realized I didn't want more menus. I want more, design stuff. But I
Mm.
think, knowing what we know, that there is a Cities Skylines version coming to VR, Cities VR, around the same time, which we haven't tried yet. I think that's going to be more depth, but in the form of menus.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the gameplay we've seen of that is them looking at menus and doing that kind of similar Skylines thing of adjusting tax rates, adjusting, different stuff like that. And I wonder how that's going to, if that's going to be as engaging, because this is very like tactile. You're
Yeah.
always kind of, even though you're not doing something at times, when you're doing something, it's very fun to kind of put things down and plan things. And I also think in general, I love the match of VR for this genre. Like,
Mm.
I've played a fair bit of City Skylines, and I would much prefer to, if I could get the full City Skylines experience in VR, no compromises, looking beautiful, I'd play so much of that, because I feel like this is such a much more fun way to design it, and quicker,
Mm.
and, you know, very cool. I just think it works really well in VR. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm worried that we're going to get like half of the game that we want in either of these games. And I'll just be here
Yeah.
like, oh, could we put both of these together and have the perfect game? I don't
There
know.
might.
I'm starting to, yeah,
It
I
feels
don't
like,
know.
the middle ground game might have been what's best, because I
Yeah,
think you put
this
it
is
to me
closer than I
like,
thought, though. To be honest,
yeah,
this is closer to like this is like almost better slash, a lot more fun than I was expecting to be. Way more simplified and not as,
it's not quite the Toy Town game
no,
that
exactly,
that I was
that
expecting
I
for
thought it
sure.
was. Yeah,
And
yeah,
I think visually it's a much smarter game than Cities VR. I think
yeah.
Cities
It looks
VR,
really
I think
nice.
clearly from what we've seen of Cities VR, it's
Yeah,
trying way too hard to replicate the PC experience. Obviously because
yeah.
it started with that as a foundation. But
Mhm.
this takes away all the kind of like texture complexity. There's not like any chance for anything to really like pop in or like get rid of all its meshes as you
No.
get closer, because it's all just very bright, colorful, simplistic, blocky stuff from the
But there's
start.
there's lots of good, cool details, like that little bird you can see
Yeah.
flying there. There, when you get the airport and there's these planes leaving trails slowly,
Yeah.
it looks stunning. Like, there are little tiny details that make it look bigger than it is in terms of its kind of art design. There's a brilliant thread actually that the developers put out on Twitter, I think today, or would be yesterday by the time this goes out, which everyone should check out. It's like a 10 tweet thread, but they kind of went, "Oh, we did this little thing and this little thing," and
Mm.
all these little kind of tricks, both in terms of development and like design, that they to kind of give it that little bit extra stuff. But
Mm.
I think the other thing too that struck me playing this is that if you stripped the titles off both of these games, or if we just pretend that the Cities VR doesn't exist, and I played this without knowing what it was, I would 100% tell you that it was Cities Skylines
Yeah.
made for VR. Like, to
Yeah.
me, having played that game, I'm like, they've taken all of the core of that game. It almost has the visual style adapted for Quest. It really reminds me of City Skylines.
Yeah.
um, I would have thought it was a City Skylines game if I didn't know better.
Yeah.
It's such a weird situation we found ourselves
It
in.
is a weird situation, and I do also think it's funny, if you've looked on Twitter or whatever this week. Clearly, there's like some small little ploy for attention going on between the two. Of
Yeah,
End Dreams has made a big song and dance about the fact that this costs 19.99,
yeah,
whereas I
yeah,
think Cities VR is either
S-
24.99 or 29.99, and it's
yeah.
like usually you don't see that big of a fuss made
And
about
this
a
is
VR game's price. But
first. Is this the first one to come out? Yeah,
this is out in what, like 2 weeks today?
2 weeks. Yeah, and then it's another week after that is Cities VR, right?
Is it 2 weeks today? Yeah, it's 2 weeks today. Yeah.
Yeah, something
Wow.
like that. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, April
Yep.
21st for this, and then April 28th for Cities VR, which I don't think we'll get a chance to play before launch. I mean, obviously aside from review code, which will be embargoed, but
Yeah.
you're like we said last week, you're going to handle both of those. So I'm
Yep.
glad that you got to play it. I'm glad to get an initial read on where you are with this because it's going to be a very
Yeah.
interesting little
It's very. The only
competition.
thing I was going to say too, which you might know because I'm not sure. This preview build we have, I think, has 6 islands in it.
Yeah, and
I've
Six
obviously
Islands is
played
what's in the game.
2. Yeah, that's basically it's the full game of the preview game, right? So 6 islands
Yeah,
is the full game.
I think so. Yeah,
Interesting.
that's the
Okay.
plan. I did see, and I
Yeah.
also saw a screenshot with bridges connecting different islands.
Yeah.
So
See, I think that's like you'll get to put because the next island I was going to play has different like it's similar to this in that you got 4 or 3 areas, but they're not connected
yeah,
at all. So I think you must get a bridge thing. But I just wish you could make like elevated or lowered because this really reminds me. And actually, now that I've thought of this, I want it so bad. Reminds me of like Roller Coaster Tycoon 1 and
yeah.
2.
Mm.
Man, someone, a modder, whoever is in our chat, please, I'm begging you, go and mod Roller Coaster Tycoon 1 or 2. I'll start a Patreon. I'll subscribe. But this reminds me of that, and you can do that kind of elevated, like almost like
Yeah.
isometric. It wouldn't have to be complicated. It'd just be like, oh, you can go up 1, 2, 3 levels, go straight again, go down again.
Yep.
It's a little bit complicated, but I wish you could do that. Just add that little bit extra kind of like design stuff to it, so I could feel like I'm personalizing it more as well. Because at the moment, I think it feels a little bit less like you're not making your city, you're making the city on the island because there's not that many options.
Because the other thing is how much of it being this cozy, relaxing, accessible city builder is the fact that they actually want it to be like that, and how much of it is the fact that they
It has to be like that.
have looked at the features that they can get onto Quest and have thought,
Yeah,
we don't want to do
yeah.
all the massively complex stuff because it won't really work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because there is kind of like a traffic thing too with this, where it definitely like the worse your roads are, it does affect the traffic, but it didn't feel
Yeah.
as punishing as the city skylines, which can be really like if you've not thought about your roads in city skylines, it can just be, terrifying. All of a sudden, you've just got like 15 cars stuck at an intersection for ages. Yeah.
So that is City Skylines, and that's how. Yeah, like
No,
2
it's,
weeks
it's
today.
not. It's not city skylines.
No,
Jamie.
oh my god, no. That is.
But
why
that is
couldn't they have just called it
where we're
something
at.
else?
But
Little
that is
World
where we're at
Builder
with
is what they
this.
should have said.
Yeah,
Damn it.
but
That's the brain fog
cities,
for you.
little cities, little cities.
Let's move on so I don't make that mistake again.
I mean, very, very forgivable mistake. To be fair, they're almost very similar.
I swear, every fast travel game, they have some sort of name that I'm going to make some sort of mistake. So with Wraith the Oblivion Afterlife, I spent a long time writing
Wraith
Aftermath.
the Afterlife. Aftermath, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just avoid these things.
And like whenever, I know you do this too, whenever I write about Minecraft, every time it's Minecraft.
Oh my god, I don't understand how I do it. I don't
know
understand
why.
how I do it.
Like what is in my brain?
Cry. What do you do Far Cry? I always write Far Cry. I put an extra Y at the end.
The Minecraft one gets me because it's like I've been a Minecraft player since the beginning. I've only known this game from like when it was on a browser. How do I spell it wrong every time? I don't know. It's one of those things. Yeah, Minecraft. It's the meat version.
My worst one was when I once wrote Strategic Shift, but I left the F out of shift.
Yeah.
And
we've all done one of those, haven't we?
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, talking about strategic shifts. Here we are.
So, Green Hill VR is coming to Quest today. And it's really, really interesting to talk about. So basically, there is a flat screen original game developed by a studio called Creepy Jar. It is your standard jungle survival. So if you've played The Forest or something more indie-ish like Don't Starve, very much the same thing. Go like crash land in the jungle, go hunt food, gather resources, eventually build up better weapons, eventually, escape. Green Hell VR on Quest is not, they haven't been very clear about this, but it's actually not quite the same game. It is the same story beats, the same like important areas of the map, then
Right.
fit into a somewhat streamlined version of the game. So there is less to build, less enemy types, and
Right.
the overall map is actually a bit smaller. And that's very, very interesting because Green Hell is also coming to PC VR in a couple of months, and that
Yeah.
is the full version of the game. That is
Oh.
the entire map, and all the mechanics and all the buildings.
Oh, that's
So
bizarre.
this is a very much stripped back version of the game, specifically for Quest. Now, hit like
Right.
I can hear people wincing. I can hear them wincing. I can see them wincing from that explanation. But let me just let me just put the story this way. I didn't realize that. Quest was the first time I had played the game at all. I didn't realize that until I went back and played some of the PC version a couple of days ago and was like, oh, this is really different. I was having a great time with the Quest version without knowing that. And
Yeah.
I think it absolutely stands on its own. So, yes, you're going to have lost a few things. There's far less enemies in the game, so it's much more about kind of resource management and not starving than it is succumbing to wounds. Although, whenever you do meet like a puma or a jaguar or something like that, they are still very, very deadly,
Mhm.
and like a serious threat. But in terms of the building, with taking out so many of the different kinds of structures you would build, like in the first game, in the original game, you would build like structures to keep yourself out of the rain, for example, and those aren't really in
Yep.
this one.
Mhm.
And you have like a much bigger set of things you can build from the start of the game, just so that it's a bit easier to get going straight away. But instead of, let's say you want to build a bonfire, in the original game, you press the E button to attack or click a mouse to attack, chop down a tree in about 5 seconds, scoop up a bunch of sticks in about 10 seconds, go throw it all at that pile, and it's made very, very quickly. In this, you are chopping down the tree physically, you are picking up the logs and stuff physically, you are then like putting the logs in place on a silhouette, like you can see in the trailer here,
Right.
hitting them with something to get them into like to peg them down in the
Mm.
ground, and
There's
then you are
more
getting
work.
some rope to properly tie them. Yeah, you're doing the work. And so you actually
Yep.
have like a few less resources, but it's in the name of kind of balancing out, um
Right.
and making it feel much more rewarding rather than like hard work. And so for me, there's this, if you take the game on its own merits, I think it's a really, really great set of interactions. I think technically the world on Quest is definitely one of the most impressive. Like everything you see here on this trailer, yeah, it looks a little muddy, but there's really dense vegetation, lots of different types of wildlife, very colorful game going on. And all of this, as you're playing, performs really, really well on Quest, provided you don't start to stack up the environment with too many items.
Right.
Which, like, if you find a coconut and you break it in half, suddenly you've got like 8 coconut halves on your hands, and
Yep.
that's when it starts to stutter a
Yeah,
little
right.
bit.
So don't get like
Um,
100 coconuts and just break
yeah,
them all in front of
exactly.
you.
Well, that
Yep.
that is it. And I said
Yep.
I interviewed the developers, and I said I think this could use like item delete option, because traditionally in the main
Yeah.
game, if something gets spoiled, like you leave food for too long, you get like maggots, but maggots are actually helpful, so they don't actually let you delete anything, because you're just kind of
Mm.
meant to be like always recycling this stuff. But here it's
Yep.
like,
Resourceful.
yeah, you should probably
Yeah.
ditch some of those features just because
Yep.
performance wise, I shouldn't be running around with all these coconuts. Like I have this
Yeah.
line of coconuts collecting rain, and every time I walk back to my camp, that's when it starts to stutter.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
so I think when I started to compare it, where I got disappointed was that this is ultimately an easier version of the game, and because
Mhm.
because the environment is smaller, it's shorter to do the same story as well. But it's still pretty lengthy for Quest standards. I would say I've been playing on the normal difficulty, and I would say it's taken me about 7, maybe 8 hours to get
Right.
through the campaign.
And how long would the PC one be? Do you know? Is it like
I
imagining
think
from what
you're
you're saying,
you're
like maybe like
probably
10 or
talking
12 or something?
I think you're talking between 10, 15 for the PC
Right.
version.
Yep.
Um, It is a significantly bigger environment, is the thing.
Now, let me get this straight. Then there's the PC VR version.
Yep.
So there's 2 VR versions. They're not the
this is
same.
Yep.
Or you don't really know
they've
yet?
always said that the development teams on these 2 versions are different teams and they are separate builds. And I always just thought that meant okay, fine, the Quest version's still the same game, but
Yeah,
they're just
they're just
spending all
making
their
it for
time
Quest.
optimizing or whatever.
Yeah.
Because I've played the PC version, and that's one thing you're seeing here in the trailer here is the players checking their arms for injuries and everything.
Mhm.
In the main PC game, you can check your arms, but you can also check your legs. And in the Quest version, you can't check your legs, so all the injuries are located on your arms. But on the PC VR version that I've played, you can also check your legs as well. So it's I actually think there's kind of almost a stroke of genius in this two-pronged approach to bringing
Yeah, we've
Green
never
Hell
seen this
2.
before, really, have we? Yeah.
Well, no, and I mean, first of all, it must be because it's really, really expensive to essentially make 2 different games.
Yeah.
But you kind of do this very good thing of making a version that makes sense for Quest and still plays really well and is a lot of fun. And then if anyone's like, oh, I don't want to play this because it's a compromised experience, it's like, okay, well, don't worry. There's a PC version waiting for you as well, right?
Yeah, or if you have a computer, plug your Quest in and see that's got me thinking now. Not that this would, as we said, very expensive, probably not viable for anyone.
Yeah.
But like the stuff like Cities VR and Little Cities, I can only imagine if you could plug that in and all of a sudden it's like the same game, but there's a few extra things you can do. It's slightly different, bigger maps, bigger, more options for I don't know, terraforming and more complex stuff like that. Interesting. What a weird approach. So when you said that the like story is smaller and the map is smaller, do we know if that's the case for the PC VR one as well, or is the PC VR map the full map?
From what I've played of the PC version of the demo they had, I'm pretty sure it's going to be the full map.
How interesting.
So yeah,
so they must have shared stuff, right? Like they must have been like, oh yeah, we've worked on this.
For sure.
Bandage mechanic.
There's definitely
so interesting. Wow, what a weird approach.
I do think it's a weird approach, but I also just think
it's kind of cool.
It really works, man. Like you're not playing
it's better than the alternative, right?
You've kind of seen this happen in some other places, like Blade and Sorcery makes cuts to get onto Quest and it's called Blade and Sorcery Nomad, but it's essentially still the same game and actually technically does suffer for it. It is pretty stuttery on Quest. Whereas this, again, if you hadn't told me that there was a different version of this, I'd be telling you it was a great survival game in its own right.
Yeah, interesting.
And it's definitely a more accessible version of the game. Like I said, there's less threats, so it's easier on that sense. But you also get new opportunities. Like if you're holding a coconut and you don't have a rock to bash it with, any stone surface in the game you can use to bash and and then there's like a kind of Walking Dead inventory system as well. So you've got like a walkie-talkie here, a backpack over your shoulder, a notebook on your other breast pocket. And I just think they've done a really, really incredible job of making it a very seamless native VR experience that isn't quite as hellish as the original Green Hell, but is a really, really good survival game all the same.
It's also one of those situations too where you go, if someone wants the more difficult, like they're dedicated to playing, it's a bit like the flight sim thing we were saying of people who want to do it, people who want to play survival games like dedicated, hardcore mode, can probably plug that in on PC and do it on PC and do it wired because they're actually going to be dedicated to it. Whereas if it's going on Quest, it's going out to, as you said, it's like more accessible. There's more people,
It's definitely the smart play. Because I feel like anyone that is like, why would I ever play a compromised version of the game? It's like, well, okay, you probably have a gaming PC to play this with then, right? Or at least you should, and you shouldn't have bought a Quest.
Or you're aware enough of the fact that it's compromised. Like you've played the original game, or you're keeping up with it enough that you realize that you care. So I wonder if we'll see more things do this.
Well,
It's
so that's the interesting thing, especially as we move into the PSVR 2 era, right? Are we going to be seeing this thing where people take these it's essentially an abridged version of the game is
yeah.
what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm all for that if it means you get, these visually rich, still mechanically complex experiences that are
And
just a bit
something
more
that someone would
condensed.
still enjoy. It's not like it's suffered
Yeah.
for it, in that if someone just played it not knowing, they would just enjoy it. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I think that honestly, I think there'd even be benefit of making this version available in the in the PC and potentially, if it happens, PSVR 2 versions as well. But yeah, just you know.
mm, mm.
So
Very
yeah,
interesting.
I'm going to be interested to see the reaction to this one, because if I was in Kuvo, I would have been a bit more
Forward.
forward facing about the fact that this is not the same one-to-one experience. But at
Mm.
the same time, I'm hoping they kind of save themselves some grief with the fact that PC VR version's coming.
Yeah, yeah. Super interesting. Is this one of those games I don't know anything about the original game. Is this one of those games that has a very dedicated following of people who are like very excited for this to come to VR? Is it one of those
Yeah,
type of games?
I think so. I think you know how certain indie developers just appear seemingly out of nowhere and have like pretty good looking survival games.
Yeah.
The survival genre is just a very
Mm.
bankable thing where if you come at it with high production values,
Yeah.
you're pretty much, and you can do a early access thing of you start with just like the first couple of areas and just a
Yeah,
couple of
you add
items,
more
and then
things
over
in
a
and
couple of
yeah,
years build it
yeah.
out. It's actually a pretty like bankable,
There's
less
an audience for
risky
it. Yeah.
thing. So
Mhm.
Greenhell's been a thing for ages, and actually the first time I ever heard about it was when Incuvo announced 2 years ago they'd be bringing it to VR. And then I
Yeah.
was like, oh, well, this is weird. This game's actually already out on PS4 and on Switch, and it looks pretty
Mhm.
decent.
Yeah.
But if you think about other games like that, so The Forest or Stranded or Ark Survival Evolved, these are
Yeah.
all indie studios that have just made very bankable, profitable games. Valhalla, for example, as well.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
all the
yeah.
same.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's true.
I think people, I think if you just have a Quest, you've never played the original game, and you just want a good survival game, I think you'll really enjoy it. I will say, I ultimately, I think probably Song in the Smoke is the better of the two,
I was gonna ask, yeah.
but I don't know if that'll be the same for the PC version. That's the
Interesting.
only other thing. But yeah,
Yeah, wow.
cool.
Unexpected. Was not expecting
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Wow. Really was
Once I
unexpected.
started
You
playing
really
the once I started playing the original version, I was like, huh, this isn't the
yeah,
same
I
game.
thought I thought when you said unexpected, like there's something unexpected about this. I thought you're just gonna be like, yeah, it looks pretty decent given it's on Quest. I thought that
Yeah,
was the
no, it
like
is.
it runs because I was like, this looks pretty intensive. I'm
Yep, nope.
surprised it, you know,
It's a
runs.
very.
Very
I
cool.
can't imagine how much effort they must have gone to get this version out while also doing the PC version. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's either that or
And
it would have been a stuttering mess at the end of the day. So
and also interesting that we were having this discussion a few weeks ago of like, wow, this is the PC version and it's stuttering. Wonder
yeah,
what it's going
true.
to be like on Quest. And it was like, oh,
Yeah,
we
that's
had
very
no
true.
idea. It's actually an entirely different. Which actually, if you come to think of it, maybe might have been that might have benefited from them being like, actually, the Quest is a different thing.
Yeah,
Because everyone's immediate thought is like, well, if this PC is stuttering, then surely Quest is
yeah,
worse,
exactly.
right? Like,
Yeah, and they could have been
yeah.
like, no, we
So
specifically devved for
yeah,
that.
specifically, it's a whole different thing, like completely different
Yeah.
game.
So
Yeah. Wow.
that is Green Hell VR Quest Edition, and you have to very specifically say Quest Edition because the PC edition is going to be a very different thing, and that's out
There you
on
go.
that's out today, and we'll be following up with the PC VR version in the coming weeks and months, and that pretty
Hmm.
much brings us to the end of the show. Harry, thanks so much for being here with me.
Thank you for having me. What a fun episode. Lots of stuff to
What a
discuss.
fine episode, a fun and fine
Yeah.
episode.
Fun and fine. Fun and fine.
Next week we'll be
Hmm.
back with, I don't know what's happening, but we'll be back. Catch
Yeah.
Ian and Heaney talking VR tech on Monday in the VR download, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for stopping by.
See you then. Thanks, everyone. Bye bye.